You're listening to the Email Expert Podcast, where you get real examples, real strategies, and expert advice with your host, Daniel Dayette.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Email Expert Podcast, the place where email professionals get an unfair advantage. Today, we've got Drew Bay with us. Drew's a professional copywriter who works with marketing agencies, international businesses, local and online businesses to increase sales. He's got a real passion for getting under the skin of your ideal prospect and selling them, especially via direct mail, print, but also online. When he's not busy creating these sales angles and writing persuasive copy for increasing conversions, he's learning the tricks of the trade and raising his newborn girl. So, Drew, why don't you give us a quick 1-minute bit on what motivated you to get into copy and how long ago was that?
Sure, Dan. Thanks for having me. I actually started into the crazy world of direct marketing and copywriting as I was working at all things, a fish plant at the time. I was actually putting myself through my marketing degree in university and trying to pay for that. And so, of course, picking up jobs at the time. God, this should have been, 13, 14 years ago, I suppose. And I can't remember what actually brought it up, but my dad kind of introduced me to the world of sales copy in particular. He had an HR consulting business of his own, and so he did a lot of research on how to promote himself and how to get the word out there. And so he'd kind of amassed quite a library of all the books that you and I, of course, would recognize from the past. So I don't know, one day he just introduced me to it and showed me copywriting. And at the time, I was like 99% of the population where I thought copywriting was, for intellectual property or for, trade material and protecting people's, legal rights. So that was news to me. But when I found out that you could actually make decent money doing this and getting people to take some sort of action just by using the written word, I was hooked because I had always been told I was a pretty good writer, and I had, visions of grandeur going into college because I always pictured I'd be in advertising and sitting around a boardroom table, coming up with advertising strategy or the next big campaign slogan. And so I didn't realize at the time that there was such a specialized form of advertising, the copywriting side. So yeah, when I realized that this was possible, I started to kind of self-teach and got into it from there.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I know what got me excited about copy myself was just the very idea that we could slip something under the nose of somebody and persuade them to do something. You've got quite a journey there. So, Drew, I know when I'm listening to experts I've never heard of, what makes me really value what they've, what they kind of bring to the table and what they're saying is, some of their accomplishments. Do you have anything that you want to kind of share with us of, some results and things that you've been able to pull off since getting your chops and your skills in copy?
Sure. Well, I rewrote a landing page for a private college's business and healthcare program, and I boosted the response from, at the time it was 2.2%. They weren't able to break that mark, but I was able to boost it up to 8.8 in the first couple of weeks. And along with that came, I think it was about $33,000 enrollment revenue and several more booked appointments too. So that was one of my more recent wins that I was pretty pleased with. I wrote launch copy in the form of emails and a big sales page for a new workout system at the time. Think Beachbody or P90X, that sort of thing. I was involved in the launch of that over their initial weekend, and I can't remember. It did somewhere north of $30,000 over the weekend, so it was pretty neat being involved in that. Just little things. I do a lot of email copy, of course, and rewrote the subject line and body copy for an email that my client sent out to one of their accounts. And I upped their open rates, for instance, from 1.5% to 11%, and also got sales up 22% as well from that same email. I could go on with lots of little wins like that because I mostly do specialize in email, but Not too long ago, I started advertising for my own services on AdWords as well, and ended up converting 9% of cold traffic into leads and downloading one of my free reports. So that was kind of rewarding as well, I'd say.
Fantastic. So, Drew, I know you write for multiple mediums and such, but today I thought we'd just, give so much value to our listeners and really dig into the process, mindset, strategy that it takes to get earth-shattering results with the written word. So in essence, how to persuade people. So let's dig into that. So what process do you use to actually figure out who the ideal prospect is for what you're selling?
That's a really good question. In this case, you're at least somewhat at the mercy of your client, but you can do a lot to not have to be. And what I mean by that is a lot of times you find clients are kind of woefully prepared to actually tell you anything of substance about their target audience. So you, as the copywriter specifically, really have to dig and get in there. So I find out what they do already have first and foremost. Do you have a client avatar? Do you have any sort of descriptions on your ideal prospects? So that naturally, I'll take into consideration and read. But specifically, I ask for customer testimonials. I also send them a comprehensive client questionnaire that I have that goes into detail on their audience and about their business as well. Some of the questions are things like, why do prospects buy from you? Why haven't prospects bought from you? What process do they go through personally to end up in their situation that gets them talking to you? I really want to understand from A to Z kind of their, to use the term, customer journey, what brings them to you and what's going through their mind and all that, so that you can kind of meet them where they are. So I'll do things like read custom reviews and comments on Amazon and other message boards where those sorts of folks hang out. I'll listen to customer audio if there is any, or even from competing companies' customers. So, there's a lot of ways you can go about kind of arriving at the ideal prospect. So I don't have a precise systematized way that I do it every single time, because so much depends on, again, the client. But those are the sorts of things that it actually takes to start getting there and best preparing yourself.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So do you have any technique or way that you get into their mindset? I know we always talk about copy as being, entering the conversation in the prospect's mind that they're already having. Do you have a process for actually like bringing yourself into that conversation?
Well, the best way, as I mentioned, the last question, is really seeing how they speak. If you can use their language and show that you actually know what they're talking about, what their challenges are, that's kind of the key to their heart and hopefully the key to their wallet. So, like I said, reading those reviews, listening to the audio, maybe even interviewing some of their best customers, yourself. I've done that before, just to find out, what makes them tick and, why they are the way they are and why they've chosen that company, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, it's kind of putting on your detective hat and just asking the right questions and getting down and dirty. There's nothing sexy about it, but that's kind of the best way to do it. Get their exact wording, how they refer to things, how do they refer to problems, whether that's in the written word or in audio, and kind of go from there.
Okay, so now there's the headline aspect of the copy, the attention getter. Do you have a magic formula or process that you follow for something like that?
Dan, I wish there was a magic formula that you could use on every headline. This topic, could easily fill a series of podcasts enough, because it's just so darn tough to do. But, once you're in this business enough, you really get to know and understand kind of the proven headline structures and concepts that are out there, and they stand the test of time. I mean, a lot of listeners will, of course, know all those clickbait ads that we see now at the end of editorial pieces when you're reading something, on Forbes or wherever, and then at the end we have the typical display ads. One weird trick destroys belly fat, or this ugly fruit removes crow's feet. I don't know, those sorts of things. So those are there, and they're always there because they're proven to work. I mean, advertisers aren't going to run that sort of creative time and time again if it's not getting results. So those kinds of things are always, strong to lead with headlines, and I'll get into why that is in a sec. But, you've got your classics, like they laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, and then do you make these mistakes in English? These ones, there's no shortage of ways that you can take a headline, but what you've got to consider naturally, of course, is who the target audience is, their knowledge of the product or service or the niche, and have they seen this sort of headline before, and what's unique to them particularly. So I know it might disappoint listeners. I don't have a process specifically for headline writing, but you just got to write out a crap load of headlines until one really makes you tingle or stands out from the rest. One that if you saw it like that without any previous knowledge of the thing, that it would make you want to read more. That's really what the headline's doing, is kind of seducing you into reading the first sentence, and then the first sentence into the second, and all that. So, I'd study great headlines and headline structures to get a foundation. Absolutely. Look up anything from Eugene Schwartz, John Caples, John Carlton, Gary Halbert, all those kinds of guys. You'll get the essence of what really gets people's attention. And you can use that as motivation to kind of write your own. There's lots of formulas you can follow, and maybe you should, to kind of get the juices flowing, and you can maybe test them out. But, at the end of the day, Dan, the most important thing that you can inject in a headline is curiosity. It's got to make the reader curious about, what you have to say, in the rest of the email, or the rest of the letter, or the rest of the landing page. If you can get people interested and curious in what you're saying, really arouse that curiosity, then you got them, right? So curiosity is the most important. And of course, in doing so, you've kind of got to telegraph that you're going to reveal something that's of interest to them in particular.
Absolutely, that makes sense. I've said for years that the headline is kind of what sells you on the advertisement, and then of course the body copy sells you on the item. But I fully agree that the advertising greats are a great place to start. Reading or studying. Studying headlines and kind of figuring out what has worked in the past. I know for me, one additional layer I kind of add is I really like to look at, what's working in the markets, in different market spaces, because I know, what you use to sell, for example, information is dramatically different than what you use to sell physical product and so on, But, I shouldn't say dramatically different, but definitely, for example, IM products, you definitely wouldn't want to use IM product copy to sell makeup. That wouldn't work. Her headline,
right.
her eyebrows were 37% smaller than they were before. Anyways.
Note to self.
Or surgery. Quite a reduction. No, anyway. So I should take a moment to talk about, in relation to email marketing, the headline is almost like the subject line, because obviously, if you read the subject, it basically sells you on opening that email. But there's a dramatically different mindset to a subject line than there is to, say, a headline on direct response or a headline on a lander. Do you want to talk about that, and then I'll kind of jump in after?
Sure. Well, the thing is, of course, when you're sitting there in the inbox along with the hundreds of other unread emails and spam and everything that our readers get, it's even more difficult to stand out there than it is, obviously on a landing page, or if you're appearing in their life in the mail. So unfortunately, what's more important than the subject line to getting opened is actually the from, who's actually sending it. If the person knows who the sender is, that's naturally going to get past their barrier and get open faster. Unfortunately, we can't all be known right away, so you kind of got to do the best you can with the subject line. And with subjects, like you said, Dan, it is just like the headline. The same sort of psychological triggers prevail, I say, in terms of curiosity. You've got to pique that interest, that curiosity, and get it opened. So a lot of times what can work, I think, in email subject lines is to use their name. That's the most interesting word in the human language, is our own names. That gets attention, and it seems to prevail, I've found, in higher open rates. So that's one kind of tactic that can help with opens. But otherwise, I like to keep them short. I really do. I think when you've got this long, flowing subject line, especially with the character limits a lot of email service providers have, it's important to kind of keep it short and to the point. So questions I found work well as well. But at the end of the day, if you're actually compelling enough, and again, piquing that interest and making them want to see what's in there, you can't go far wrong. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, though.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. The one piece that I'd add to email subject lines is that when I come into a project and, brand new, and I'm about to write copy for a client I've never worked with before, usually the first couple of things that I ask them is, like, how does this list know us? What was the first thing they signed up for? What have we talked with them about so far? Like, where are we at in the conversation? And I want to get a gauge for, like, are they bored of us yet? If they're still opening, how do I continue that success? How do I continue on with that relationship? Tone of voice, like the whole 9 yards. I really want to figure out where we're at in the conversation. Now, if they're brand new, that's a totally different conversation than a re-engagement campaign of, hey, we screwed up. Obviously, you don't like what we're sending anymore. So let's change that. I fully agree with you that, the from is actually more important than the subject. And I might even add that the email from, address, we call the envelope address, of who it came from. If you ever find that, you're going to do a re-engagement campaign, you should probably, send it from, like, if you normally send it from support at or no reply at, it's not a bad idea to send it from, Drew at or Dan at, so that people will actually think they can reply and engage in a conversation. But anyways, so first of all, try and figure out where we are in the conversation. Then, for me, I fully agree with you that the first putting somebody's name in there can help, but obviously it wouldn't help as much with a re-engagement. So I think there's different types of email subject lines, whether it be, promotions or whatever. But I always try and make it feel human. I found it really interesting. I had this one client who, they were mailing a list that didn't necessarily want what they had. They signed up, forgot they signed up, and now just, it was inconvenient to unsubscribe, so they were still getting the emails. And in that situation, the email subject lines that got the most opens were very personal. And I find the same thing with re-engagement campaigns, but it doesn't matter if you have a relationship with your list or not. If you come from that place of, is everything okay? ? If you come from that place of, something like I'm sorry, if you're ever doing a re-engagement campaign, or do you still need this? Or, quick answer, yes or no. I need your feedback. As long as you're engaging in that conversation, one of the biggest email experts out there basically says that our role as email marketers is to suppress the unengaged. That's like, second in line to first build a relationship, second suppress the unengaged. Anybody who's not engaging is at danger of clicking the spam button. Certainly after 90 days, if nobody's opened or clicked something, just boot them off the list or put them into your monthly newsletter only list. Mm-hmm. But anyways, yeah, long story short, that's my personal formula, is that I'm looking for where are we in the relationship, and then, how can I kind of, how can I continue that relationship and kind of figure out where we're at from there? So in my subjects, sometimes if it's a promotion thing, I might put a deadline in the subject line to get opens. We might put a pain point. But you know what I like to do? When you're sending to a list regularly, and I mean more than once a week, I think it's also important to train them that your copy headlines, like your info-packed, benefit-filled, like really teasy subject lines, are when you put your best content in, and your drab subject lines are when you put your promos in, because then they never know what they're getting. Because when you train a list that put a subject out there that says something like I can't believe this is happening to me, ? Right? And then you put in there something really juicy of a new tip or resource, and you actually make something really useful that has absolutely nothing for sale. Then the next email that comes out, imagine it's something like, maybe it's something like 3 things that work for us, right? And that one's not salesy. Or, that one has the promo in it. You get the idea. Anyways, so I guess the next kind of place we can kind of dovetail into, now that we've pretty much beat with a horse the conversation of email versus direct mail headlines, is the next part is kind of the body copy. And my old adage has always been relate to the reader, maybe make them feel a little uncomfortable enough to want to change, because we all know human beings who are comfortable stay where they are. So we need to make them a little uncomfortable. And then maybe show them the greener pasture, a better way. Do you agree with that approach, or do you have a different approach, or do you have multiple formulas? What's Captain Copy say to that one?
Yeah, that's an age-old formula that you just gave, the old problem, agitate, solve framework, which can be very good. I've used that, and it's a good one. But like a lot of the answers to these questions, and it's not a cop-out, but it really does depend on the audience again that you're writing to. There's a great example from one of my personal mentors, the great copywriter Paris Lampropoulos. Before he really broke in big in this business, he was a struggling real estate agent, and he was trying to sell a book that he wrote, about how to sell real estate, how to sell your home in depressed markets, or in a buyer's market sort of thing. And so he ended up writing up a sales letter for this book, and he compiled a list for it that he mailed the sales letter off to. And, he's all excited and stuff, and he was learning actually from Gary Halbert how to write copy at the time. And he sent this letter off and excited, hoping there's going to be some orders in the mail. Again, this is even before pre-internet days. And sure enough, he got squat. Nothing came of it. And he ended up having one of his mentors look at it, and he's like, Paris, what are you doing? You've got to take out these first 3 pages, and the problem with those were Paris approached it with the whole doom and gloom thing, that we're in a terrible market right now. Look at just down the street, everybody's selling and prices are being pushed down, yada, 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 horrible market. He's really painting the picture and really kind of twisting that knife in, which is what your typical problem, agitate, solve framework would do. And so, he was going on and on about the doom and gloom, and his mentor had told him to get rid of those first 3 pages where you're doing that. These people already know that they want to sell their homes. They already know what the problem is. So you're just, beating that dead horse again and annoying them, if nothing else. So, that's a point where, again, you need to understand how mature the audience is and where they are right now. You can go so far as to actually, scare people too. If you're going on and giving all the doom and gloom and the facts and figures without, getting into something meaty, people just kind of turn you off and just completely ignore it. So that's, again, depending on where your audience is. A really strong, advanced way to start the body copy is actually with a story. I really like doing that. There was actually a study done recently, Dan, that showed when our brain is hooked up to a functional MRI machine and we're listening to a story that somebody's telling, the logical and reasoning parts of the brain actually switch off. Meaning a story's, the perfect way past the surface clutter and through the naturals, or through the reader's natural resistance, to being sold to. We all love hearing stories. We've just been programmed that way, since birth, and it's been that way since millennia, since the first caveman went out and, bagged that night's dinner with the saber-toothed tiger and brought it back into the cave, and they're telling stories and the cave walls and all that. I mean, it's just so much a part of our being. People love story. And if you can start your copy with a relevant story, it can kind of sort of buy you time past the reader's selling resistance. They don't realize that they're being sold to. And so once you transition from the story into your product or service, whatever it is that you're trying to sell, you've earned some goodwill by that time. The Wall Street Journal has a really famous ad you'd probably know. God, it's probably coming up a century old now, and it ran for decades in New York Times and big publications like that. And it started off, one warm spring evening, two men graduated from the same university with the same grades at the same time. And, it goes on from there. But then the key difference being that one of those guys is now, the president of XYZ company, and the other guy is, just kind of a lowly division manager still, grinding it out. And so, of course, naturally, as it goes and tells a story, you find out that the guy who's super successful was the one who was reading the Wall Street Journal all this time, and, the other guy, not so much. So that's kind of an example, again, of where you can go with the body, and specifically with a story. And story is a really, really neat thing that you can use. So again, these are just kind of different ways you can go. But ultimately, you've got to make it relevant. It's got to be like you're having a one-on-one conversation with people. You're not talking to a group. You're not talking to an audience. You're talking to that one person. And, you've really got to prove that you know your stuff and that you know where they're at. Empathy is probably the most important, emotional trigger that you can have in your copy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, within that body copy, obviously the whole point in that, you've talked about stories, you've talked about all those, about being relational and the empathy and such. I think, it's probably important to also kind of mention that in that body copy, we're hoping to get somewhere. And that's to have a mindset shift where, we're going to be able to kind of, segue into an offer or an action or a call to action of sorts. I like what you said about those homeowners and that whole topic, because I think, you remember in the mastermind group that I have, I posted the Eugene Schwartz stages of buyer awareness.
Yeah.
I think when a person who went to write that copy, who had all that doom and gloom stuff, if they'd realized that their buyers were already freaked out, they wouldn't need that piece, right?
Exactly.
The stage of awareness. Anyways, now I just wanted to slip in here a piece of we've been talking about copy in general. A lot of what we're talking about really well relates to direct response, landing pages. But let's kind of, for 2 seconds, kind of talk about email copy and, how we might do things a little differently. with the body copy. It's not dramatically different, but I know there's a couple of slight differences to how we might approach, body copy in an email versus on a lander. Any thoughts there?
Sure. One of the most important things I learned from one of my mentors about writing email copy, particularly when it's a promotional email, that's kind of what I'll focus on here, is when you're trying to promote your product or service or whatever it is through the email, don't put the emphasis so much on the email to do the selling. You don't want to overload the email and fill it with a whole bunch of facts and figures and all that. What the email's job in this case is to get that click, to earn the click from the reader, and then you take them off to your landing page or your sales page or whatever it is that you ultimately want them to do. I mean, the email is critical because it's supposed to, again, gain that goodwill, and you're supposed to get that curiosity and get them kind of going down the rabbit hole. But ultimately, you want them to click on the link in that email, and then that landing page, the next step, can actually sell them and further convince them, to take the next step. So I found that, you can really make things short and sweet in your emails. They don't have to be. Obviously you want to test that, but I think the really important thing is that email is supposed to be, like I said, kind of a slippery shoot. It's supposed to get them interested, and it's supposed to line up that click perfectly, so they have no choice but to want to find out more.
I'm really glad you said that, because one of the things I was going to say, which you've already said, so that's great, saves us time, is that you can't close an email. You can't put an order button in an email. You can't, insert a shopping cart into email. And, as much as we want to, email to evolve and grow, that's not something we really need to be able to do in email. So it's really important that email actually just sell the click rather than selling the product. But, you can tell stories. And in fact, I have one situation coming up this week where I have to write an email for a product. And I know that the lander is a shopping cart with very little copy on it. So in that case, I really have to tell a good story. But again, I can't close in email, so I need to get people to that page. So...
Right.
You're fully right. I mean, the big difference with email is that we're really focused more on selling the click than trying to actually close. So that leads us to that nicely dovetails into closing. I know it's different depending on the medium, but I think landers and direct mail are pretty similar other than the actual mechanism, whether it's an order button or a mail-in form or something. But do you have any thoughts that you want to add to closing, like to actually asking for the order?
Yeah. The old sales acronym ABC, always be closing? Mm-hmm. Well, that's my thoughts on the matter. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. But if you're not closing without kind of restating your offer, without repositioning the most juicy parts of what it is that you're offering, even your unique selling proposition, your guarantee, that's a huge lost opportunity. There's a saying in amongst copywriters, tell them what you already told them. Well, that's what you got to do again. And by taking those key elements, like I said, what's on offer, what makes it different, what's your guarantee again, you've really got to sum it up nicely again, specifically for those skimmers that don't read through everything, right? So it's your chance to kind of stack everything up and reiterate what you have. A really neat technique to use on the closing is to put the reader at a crossroads, saying, you can continue to go down this route and hope that, you're going to line up a whole bunch of business and that you're going to grow and hit your targets, blah, blah, blah. Or you can take this offer, blah, 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 and, realize that you're going to be able to do all this in half the time with this proven model, blah, blah, blah. Really make them put the crux of the situation, bring them back to the here and now in what their options are, what's more preferable to you, what'll happen if you do this or you won't do this. Future pacing is another thing. You're probably familiar with this term, Dan. You say in the close, imagine how good that would feel with, not having any stiff aching joints anymore, or, imagine having an influx of leads every single week coming in so that you don't have to, or that the clients will be chasing you as opposed to the other way around and looking to do business with you. Imagine how great this will feel, and, really painting that picture and putting them in that moment so that they can actually, feel for a second what it might be like for them to benefit from whatever it is you're selling. It's just another technique, but it's so critical that when you're closing, you like I said, wrap it all up and really, really say what's at stake. Of course, a PS is mandatory in our business. I say, again, it's your opportunity to kind of remind them of the advantages that you put forth and summing things up, giving the guarantee. So when you're going to be closing and you sign off, definitely you want to have a PS as well, specifically for those skimmers if they're just going right away to the end of the piece.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like what you said, but I want to add something to this too. For anybody who has to write a close or an ending to something, I have this list that I've kept for over 15 years. That I got from my mentor, Corey Rudel. And in it, he wrote a bunch of things that you should never say when you're closing. Things like obligation, believe it or not, even the word purchase. And instead he had words like investment, your investment instead of your purchase, or instead of, obligation, your commitment, But he also said things like, never actually say, buy this now. Instead, he would say things like, download this now, or he'd say subscribe, or, join the membership, or like there'd be words that involve the action without the cash conversation. Because we all have these different money mindsets. And my buddy Kevin from Green Rock Financial has this thing he teaches people about their money story. I think a lot of us have a really warped money story, especially prospects. Our relationship with money growing up in terms of how our parents saw it, how we saw it. Even if you come from a rich family, it could be a really twisted view that doesn't necessarily have to be there. So I think that if we remove that part and simply talk about the invitation to experience the product, to buy, or, where can I ship this, but never make it about the money part. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
it's a good point.
That's my little tiny chunk on closing. I always try and make it feel like something that your best friend would tell you about the product, and they would never say, give me your credit card information, purchase this, no obligation, here's the contract, They would probably say something like, why don't you join me? I can't wait to see you in the membership area, download this resource, or, become a subscriber, become a part of the club, like conversational words. Anyway, so shifting focus, that was pretty cool stuff there. Shifting focus about actually just looking at the time, I think I'm just going to go for the gold. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Drew, and I have to admit, I'm actually, this is probably the only thing that's probably going to, kind of separate us a little bit, Drew, because it frustrates me and it actually makes me a little bit bothered by you, because you see, I'm jealous that you got to hang out with some copy greats. and it actually kind of, I feel a little bit of jealousy there towards, I think you got to hang out with like Clayton Makepeace, got to see Dan Kennedy speak. And I wanted to ask you, well, number one, feel free to brag and tell us a few of the names that you got to meet. But secondly, could you dig into, was there anything that you picked up there that you didn't already know from the books and resources and courses that that you got in the beginning?
So you're letting me name drop, huh?
Well, what's nice is there's a lot of us that are, we're in love with copy, that we get to hear all these names on paper, on websites. You got to see them in the flesh. You got to see their bodies walking around,
I hope it was them. Yeah, actually.
And they wear clothes, right?
That's a different podcast. Yeah, I was down at AWAI, American Writers and Artists Institute, annual copywriting boot camp at Delray Beach last October. It was fantastic. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the big gurus were there, Dan Kennedy, like you said, Clayton Makepeace, David Deutsch, Paris Lampropoulos, Ben Settle, Kim Krause-Schwalm. I mean, the names kind of go on and on. I have to actually bring out my outline of who was there to kind of remind me, because there was just so many of them. But yeah, it was really neat, Dan, and kind of felt like that giddy schoolboy kind of meeting their celebrity, crush sort of thing. So in between the swooning, I was able to actually take notes. So I thought one of the things that I'd really neglected, I think, before boot camp, and it really brought it back into focus, was listening to Ben Settle's talk, and his was all about creating a rogues gallery, is what he called it, is kind of lining up a whole bunch of different potential enemies of your target audience, and feeding off of those fears and frustrations and all that kind of stuff to write compelling copy. This doesn't have to be people specifically. It can just be problems or situations that you're in, and so he really painted that picture again of bringing out these enemies, these rogues that are challenging you on an everyday basis, and write about those. It kind of goes along, I guess, the whole problem, agitate, solve that we were talking about earlier. But some of the examples he used, I thought it was really fantastic. To really make things visceral, I guess, is what I'm trying to say for the reader. That's one of the most important things you can do in copy, is to make things tangible, make them visceral, so that people feel them. Speaking in actions, not abstractions. Another thing that came about is Clayton Makepeace shared, and it's just one simple little sentence that he said you use towards the end of a sales letter. Actually, I guess I could have mentioned this in the last segment on the closing, is he said what he's found used really has upped conversions, just adding this one little sentence, is, don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to review your order on the next page. And I thought, wow, that simple little thing actually makes a difference. And apparently so. He was reciting some statistics on that, where they added that on the sales letter. They split tested it against not having it. That alone, accounted for, I think it was at least 25% or 30% increase in conversions. So I just thought that was wild. What else? I mean, it was just I was just filled with ideas and a motivation through the week. But those are two that really stand out to me right now, Dan. I'd love to get back to you with more.
Yeah, no, that's more than juicy. Do you have any kind of stories of interesting things you've had to write copy for? I mean, things that. Shoot, I mean, if I went through my history, I know I've written from like everything from Disney Interactive to Skin Cream and soccer nets. I could probably even get funnier, but like you said, that might even be a different podcast. Any interesting copy stories?
Geez, I don't have many sexy kind of, Madison Avenue crazy type advertising stories or working with some celebrity type clients, unfortunately. I guess a couple things might come to mind. Recently, I used to work at a company who, among other things, wrote copy for an offshore asset protection expert. And so, very unsexy in and of itself, but we're talking about, a guy who'd help high net worth individuals, protect their money from, Uncle Sam and the evil IRS and all this. And, he'd set up legal, mind you, offshore structures like trusts and LLCs and all these kinds of things. And so, that in itself isn't that exciting, but it was just interesting that, this is the kind of guy that a lot of people would ask, well, isn't that illegal? Isn't that kind of like Cayman Island stuff? And are you working for someone that's on the up and up? And so, that was kind of interesting. Cause most folks, right away thought that he's, dealing dirty, but, one of my clients, I recently had to write a promotional email discussing menopausal women's challenges. So if that's kind of interesting or out of the ordinary, that might be something as well. And I had to turn it into a pitch for one of their products at the end. And I guess, I've had pretty straight-laced clients, I'd say, for the most part. I'm just thinking back, Dan, to a few years ago when I was still working in the agency game. I was actually responsible for coming up with new text and image ads for an adult phone chat brand called Live Links. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with that. Of course, locally not familiar in the sense of calling them, but but I mean, you see the ads everywhere, right? I mean,
yeah. So I was involved in having to come up with new creative for them, among some other brands under that whole phone chat umbrella. So as you can imagine, it made for some interesting days and conversations. It got my brain activated, that's for sure.
I can only imagine. So that obviously, who knows, maybe that could even help relationships at home, huh?
Yeah, that's right. I'll report back to you with my findings.
There you go. Well, so I'm going to add two pieces to this. So part one, before we kind of wrap this up, do you have any kind of tips you want to share with anybody that's kind of wanting to write something that would help increase their sales, or any kind of a closing thought on copy that you think we might not have kind of touched on at all?
Sure. This could do another podcast in itself, but it's pretty simple, but anybody knows that this is key, and that's to read the classics. I can't stress enough how important it is, to read the classics. I'm just looking behind me here on my bookshelf, and the one that really got me into copywriting and really appreciating it is Tested Advertising Methods by John Caples. I absolutely love that one. Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins, Breakthrough Advertising, Eugene Schwartz. If you study those books and really, reread and highlight and get involved, you can exponentially increase, the success you'll get from writing copy. And at the end of the day, what's most important, I mentioned it earlier too, is being visceral, being specific when you write. We should probably have a workshop on this, that kind of gives examples of how to go into that. But one of the biggest mistakes people make in their writing is, apart from, say, coming off desperate, is they don't use enough specifics when they're describing things. So, specific sell generalities just bore people. So when you can be more specific in your writing, you can't go far wrong with that. And I don't care what people say, but when you're writing good sales copy, I mentioned earlier, it's like a conversation you're having with the person. Write like you speak. this isn't an English essay. You're not getting graded on your English. You can start a sentence with and or but, and I frequently do. So, make it casual, make it like you're actually speaking with people on the other end of the page. You can't go too far wrong with, being personable, like you said, Dan, earlier. So, I could go on, but really that's a really important piece of advice I can give people that are interested in writing better copy.
Beautiful. Okay, well, I think I know for you, you mentioned some of the greats on your shelf. I know for me, I've frequently told people over the years I've got 2 72-inch tall shelves loaded with copywriting resources. Of course, I must say some of those I call copywriting resources, are books on psychology or actual what do they call it? Books similar to that. But anyway, long story short, I think you'd have to agree, we both agree that, writing amazing copy, truly being gifted at this, is really a lifelong commitment. And anybody who's been kind of listening to you so far, Drew, has been going, wow, I don't know if I'd want to make that kind of commitment to being a full-time copywriter, or knowing half of what, knowing how much Drew. How would you like people to contact you? Should they, wish to work with you, maybe look at getting you to look at their copy, or even hiring you? How would you like people to reach out to you?
I just simply tell them to email me. I'm very responsive via email, and I love hearing from people and actually getting to read their concerns. I'm very visual, so they can just send me an email. It's Drew, my name, DREW, at captaincopywriting.ca. So captain like the captain of a ship, and then copywriting.ca. Alternatively, I actually offer a really neat new resource. It's a report with some more proven persuasion methods, taken from actual real life success stories. Some even going back like 100 years or more. I think people get a lot out of it because they can apply it immediately to their own business. And they can download that. It's a free report, and it's called How Simple Words Earn Substantial Returns. And they can go to captaincopywriting.ca, just like in my email address, captaincopywriting.ca/H is in Harry, S is in Sam, W is in William, E is in Eric, S is in Sam, R is in Rick. So that's captaincopywriting.ca/HSWESR.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Drew, for coming on to the show today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please, if you enjoyed anything you heard today, or if anything gave you some great insights, please leave us a review on iTunes or Google Music. And please feel free to reach out to Drew if you're looking for copy advice. I know that he has a review service, so he can look over existing copy. I know that he can actually, of course, execute and take care of copy needs for you if he has a spot. So spaces do go quickly with a guy like that and his talents, so please reach out to him, and thank you for listening in.
Thanks a lot, Dan. I appreciate being on the show.
Thanks for listening to the Email Expert Podcast. To get your free guides, templates, and more, join us at www.emailexpertpodcast.com.